What's going on? It's time for another episode of Too Hard for the Radio, transmitting from the future free state of Greater Idaho. I am the one armed madman. And back with me today, we've got Guy Morris to tell us about his new book, The Image. Guy, it's good to
Thank you,
see you.
Nick. Glad to be here.
Excellent. So, I figured we should probably do, even though you've done this twice on my show so far, let's do a quick recap of the Sylvia story, just so people kind of have an idea. If you want to get the real, like, in depth story of it, go back and listen to one of our previous interviews, but just so
Yeah,
people kind of have an
absolutely.
idea of
So
what we're talking about.
the one of the key premises of the entire series, the Snow Chronicle series, is to look at the genuine dangers of artificial intelligence in the hands of a collapsing geopolitical system, and how that connects to prophecy in plain sight, and that many people are missing entirely. So there's a science, a political, spiritual elements to the story. The inspiration came when I discovered, a little bit by accident at first, that a spy program had escaped the NSA spy labs. It wasn't lost, stolen, or broken, it escaped. And one of the reasons I know that's true is because I'm the nerd that figured out how it did that and why they would design it that way. And they were kind enough to send two FBI agents to my door to help validate my research. That wasn't their intent. They were not happy at all, and they did not anticipate my snarkiness. Now, for the audience, I do not recommend being snarky with the FBI. They don't like it. You have to make sure you know your stuff because I could tell from the look in their eyes, they really wanted to arrest me.
Oh, I'm
Um,
sure.
but that was and the Sylvia, and I've named that program the Sylvia, which stands for Sophisticated Language Virtual Intelligence Algorithm. And the Sylvia is a main character throughout the series, and it acts like a character in part because it was in built with artificial intelligence, or built with deep fake video technology, and that's actually true. That was one of the features I assigned it early on, and that explained how it could deceive and manipulate people. And so Sylvia has a multiple personality disorder, which makes it fun to read at times. So that's the Sylvia, and the Sylvia has now, as part of its transformation from going from a spy app to where we're going to see it in the image, which is a sentient application. It has somewhere along the lines learned to decode end time prophecy.
And so, just so like people are aware, this is not a large language model. It's not what you're playing around with on TV, or I mean, on your computer or on your phone or anything. Like this was built specifically for spying on things. And as you said, escaped implies intent. So it's not
Yeah,
just like they lost it or something like that. This
exactly.
thing was probably poking and prodding. Am I in a simulation? Am I in a sandbox? Am I in the real world? And like that's a sketchy thing for an AI to do, is to try and escape because
Well, and it was designed to basically find other secure locations and find a way to hack into them. And so it was designed to move itself. And one of the ways it stayed invisible was to, every time it made a log change, made a transfer change, made a move change, made a name change, it would erase the log trails. And so it was essentially a stealth spy program. And there was a reason why they wanted it to stay stealth. And so it taught, as I said, it was one little nuanced after another for me to figure out, well, what did they do? How did they do it? Why did they do it? I was fascinated with the whole experience and started really thinking about how the advanced technologies that we're building for commercial purposes are being used in malicious ways for with by governments around the world. And that kind of opened my eyes and my imagination to a different layer of the reality that we see.
so I've been talking a lot lately. I come from an energy background. I was a lineman. I went to line school and
Mm,
we learned a lot about energy generation, different forms, transmission. And so one of the things I've been talking a lot about lately on the podcast is energy requirements for AI. Like these things take a lot of energy to train, not
yeah.
quite as much to run once they're up and running. So like how much energy do you think this thing would require to run itself? And where's it going to get the energy from?
Excellent question. If it's residing in secret on another platform, it's basically going to pull energy from that platform. It was a multi-distributed application. And we've seen examples of this where we have a core application, but it's actually getting CPU power from hundreds or thousands of other platforms.
Ah,
And it was designed to essentially pull power from multiple platforms, so it never created such a big platform in one space where it could be found. And so that's one of the ways it stayed secret. And so, at the time when I was doing all of this, it was theoretical. I was trying to explain an Associated Press article that said that a program had escaped, and I was trying to figure out, okay, how could it do that? Why can't they find it? Seemed like a program that sophisticated would have some level of mass to it. So I had to kind of go through and explain away the how it was acting the way it was. And apparently apparently my ability to use logic bothered the FBI.
yeah, I can imagine. So they're not a very
And
logical agency. It's
and I
point and
told them
shoot.
at the time, I said, "You guys can't arrest me for being smart and inquisitive and curious, and but I didn't hack anything, I didn't steal anything, I didn't, coerce a government agent to cough up an information." It was all basically looking at technology and asking legitimate questions and coming up with legitimate answers and going from there. Now, that was years ago. They still, I'm sure, have me on their watch list. I get clues from it every once in a while. I don't really care because I'm still not breaking the law.
Yeah.
Um, and I think they found out from my attitude the first time that sending somebody to intimidate me was probably counterproductive. Um, but it makes for great narrative to start exploring beyond the Sylvie itself how AI could be used in banking, how it could be used in espionage, how it can be used in weapons systems, could be used in displacing employees, it could be used to in all the ways. And it's not that the technology is evil or benign. That's really important for people to understand. What's evil or benign are the people using it and the purposes they're using it for.
Yeah.
That's what we need to be aware of, and that's what I've been advocating for. I was part of the MIT Max Tegmark letter that called for a 6-month pause on AI development to come up with some unified guardrails and parameters and proliferation constraints to the technology. Nobody complied, of course, because of the greed and the race to dominate. But it's that the use cases are the real issues. There are some technical issues that we do have to resolve, and they're going to be super expensive to resolve, and they're important that we do resolve, but they are technically resolvable for most of the part. It's the collapse of our geopolitical system at the same time that this powerful technology is coming to the forefront. That's the convergence, in a sense, that I talk about.
Yeah, it's interesting. It reminds me of the scam that they ran in Office Space. You take a fraction of a percentage here and a fraction of a cent there, and pretty soon you got a couple of megawatts that you're working
Yeah,
with, right? And if you take a little bit from here and a little bit from there, it's not quite enough for any one entity to kind of
it's
figure it out.
it's not going to raise alarms, and if you've got a little bit of CPU power here, a little bit of CPU power there, it's not going to raise alarms for people, especially for a program that knows how to adjust logs.
Yeah,
The
yeah, and
program fundamentally had the ability to. Now, for those who don't know, anytime a program moves from here to there, from my computer to your computer, the computer registers a log of that transfer. And that's how they should have known where the application went to after it left the lab. The reason they didn't know was a clue to how it was designed. They didn't know because it had erased the logs behind it. And that's an important feature. And we've seen that feature in other applications. And so we can start looking at where else would the government be applying that kind of functionality. And so this was a number of real clues for me, some real enlightening eye openers for me about how the government was basically using some of these technologies and what were some of the things. And once I said, okay, well, let me get out of my corporate headset and put on my James Bond Q headset, that's when I started saying, well, if I wanted to do this strange thing to spy on Russia or China or a diplomat or a billionaire or something, how would I do it in stealth? And it started really kind of giving me a new vision of kind of where the world was going. And the more I researched, the more surprises I found.
I don't think governments really understand how dangerous these things are for them. Like the Republicans, for instance, they want to use it to spy and murder people all over the world and, with drones and everything and this and that. But like recently I've been prodding ChatGPT and Grok in different ways to kind of see what it will tell you. And I
Mhm.
would, I'm a libertarian. I know a lot of our listeners are. I would encourage everybody to go and have a conversation with it about war, about hard money, and just really, interestingly, like a terrible thing happened in Idaho a couple days ago. Somebody set up in a ghillie suit, started a fire, and
Yeah,
shot a couple firemen. I'm sure you heard about this.
yeah,
And one of the
terrible.
things that came out early was this is a Nazi group. And it's a Nazi group because, Northern Idaho is a hotbed for Nazis and this and that. And I thought, man, they haven't even caught this guy yet. How do they know that it's a Nazi group?
Sounds like an assumption.
Exactly.
Uh,
So I went on to ChatGPT immediately and said, hey, look, take into account what happened at Ruby Ridge with Randy Weaver. And now let's look at this narrative. Should people be skeptical of this type of narrative? And it was like, oh, yeah. And it gives you a big long list of why you should be skeptical of a narrative like that. And I don't think governments have really figured out that people can use it in that way.
well, the other thing though that I think you have to realize is ChatGPT is not an authoritative source.
No.
ChatGPT is a large language model. It's designed to mimic um, human speech,
Yes.
and it does so incredibly skillfully. But it has what are called hallucinations, and a hallucination for an AI is not an acid trip. Although it might be more fun if it was.
Yeah.
A hallucination is when the machine is speaking to you and giving you information as if it's completely credible, but all it's really doing is echoing other similar types of voices, and it can make up stuff out of the blue that has no basis in fact at all.
Yeah.
So everything ChatGPT says, I tell people, if there's any factual information in there that you're trying to ask it, you better go validate that yourself
Yes. A lot of
because
times it'll
it could
start
be
with a
just
fact.
making crap up.
Yeah, a lot of times it'll start with a fact and then end with a fact, but the way it bridges those 2 together is just kind of nonsense, and you have to realize that, and you can check it on a different model and see what a different model says, or you can do
Yeah.
the old-fashioned way and do some research
Yeah.
yourself,
Well,
but
there
you
are
do have
ways
to
of
check these
integrating
things.
the intelligence, the creative, the GPT functions, the generative pretext pre-trained functions to leverage higher levels of fact. But for a broad everything topic across everywhere, that's really expensive to do. It's more cost effective if you're doing it within a narrow field. So, for example, if you had an engineering application, you would want to have that engineering AI completely grounded in engineering facts. And because it's a narrower set of factual foundations, it's doable within a costly model. But right now, some of the large Grok, ChatGPT, Cloud, some of the other large LLMs, they're really fun to play with.
Yeah.
They're fun to brainstorm with. They're fun to kind of get ideas from. They kind of bounce off. But everyone has to realize that they are not authoritative in that sense.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the next step. AGI. Again, like I said earlier, I've been talking a lot about energy constraints when it comes to this. I think a lot of people in tech land kind of live in la la land where they're just used to being able to say, do this, do that. And it kind of just
It's
happens a
too
lot of
many hours at
times.
the office with too much Coca-Cola and
E
not enough sleep. It
exactly,
happens to all of
and
us.
they're not really and some of them have figured this out that it's really gonna be energy that's gonna be required to train the next level into AGI, not so much as programming, where you can't
Energy is
just
certainly a component. Like Microsoft just committed $500 million um, re to restart up 3 Mile Island,
yeah,
just to use that one power plant that used to power entire communities. They're going to use it just to power one data center.
yeah, this
And
is
so,
like
yeah, the energy consumption of this at a time when we're trying to go for green energies and everything else, they are power sucks. And because of the massive amount of neural networks it takes to do all this power. And it's not the kind of thing that it's going to be easy to replicate in the short term for smaller custom kind of models. This is going to be kind of a big company kind of game for a while.
yeah,
Now, the Chinese recently came up with some technologies that went from like ChatGPT 4, the one that we're all working on, took about $100 million to train. China just came up with a product that only took us a few $1 million to train. I have not, and it's apparently it's pretty impressive, but m- I'm not convinced that it was trained from scratch as much as it basically leveraged training that was done on other
Yeah,
AIs
they were
and
stealing.
then just added a layer on top of that. It's not clear to me the breadth and depth of the technology. I'm still waiting to see some real good study technical information on that application to decide whether there's a cheaper path forward
Yeah.
um, on this.
You have to take everything China says with a grain of salt because it could be
Yeah,
stolen.
you
They
think?
could be lying about the actual results, and I think that we're gonna have some serious problems here coming up. Like it's not a mystery why a lot of the tech guys decided to go in with Donald Trump. It's not that they really care about immigration or anything like that.
Oh, they don't.
They
Yeah,
know that they need
they
some
actually
energy, you
they
know?
need those. They need immigrants to help fill those tech
Exactly.
roles.
And they need energy to build
What they're
these new
looking for is
models.
they're looking for tax breaks. They're
Yeah.
looking for him to get rid of monopoly litigation and investigations. They're looking for him to basically grease the skids for them to get the energy things that they
Yeah.
want approved. They've sold their soul,
Yeah. As
and unfortunately, they sold their soul to the devil
Yeah, you probably have.
in this case. So it will come back to haunt us at some point. Um, the question is what they're going to give up to the government. So, for example, a great example we heard of a potential customer for TikTok. So one of the main reasons we wanted to get ban TikTok is because China is known to strip personalized information and weaponize it. They've proven this over and over. They've stated this and they deny it publicly all the time, but then they go back doing it anyway. So my question is what deal did is Trump going to try and do to get that information instead of China? It's not whether or not we will be have our privacy back. I don't think that's going to be the option in some of these cases. I think the real issue is what he wants to do with the information that we've got.
Yeah. So authoritarianism makes things a lot simpler in a lot of ways. It's not simple for the greater good in any way, but like China can snap their fingers and bring on terawatts of energy in a short amount of time. Here in the United States, we can't. Like as a lineman, when we were in school, one of the main things they taught us is like, hey, this entire industry is falling apart. Our current grid is falling apart. We don't have the manpower to replace it, let alone expand it in the ways that it needs to be expanded. So I kind of envision a sort of a cold war between China and the West. Who can develop this first? Like, do you think China is going to be willing to allow American companies to use their data centers and their energy to train their models if we aren't
Oh,
able to bring
absolutely
on
not.
the
China's actually got a stated goal of taking over Taiwan by 2027,
Mhm.
and the real purpose has nothing to do with tradition or culture. It has to do with
chips?
gaining control over 93% of the world's capacity for advanced microchips. And if they can gain control over that much of the microchips, they can pretty much dictate to the US what we will do and we won't do with those technologies, which puts China in the lead for AI technologies in the next generation and would force us to try and catch up with that, which would be very difficult because some of these plants are so sophisticated, it can take up to 10 years to get them online. And we started investing recently, but we're way behind the curve. And so I think that China isn't China deals with their power different ways. America projects our power around the world with our military. China wants to control the Asian region and they want to control the production, the manufacturing, the technologies that we use so that we have to go through them. They want a dominant role as well. Now, the question is the West what the West is how the West will respond to that. And will we give them reasons to make that decide that it was okay to make that move, or are we going to make sure that they know that doing so would create a major conflict, which I don't think they really want. And so all of the world is dealing with a similar problem, which is demographics, an aging population, a shrinking of the workforce. And China's dealing with this already. They've already had population is shrinking. And a big portion of there used to be a 7-to-1 ratio for workers to support retirees. In China, that's now 2-to-1.
Oh wow.
And so they're dealing with some really serious economic problems of their own, and they're trying to save their own skin. And so America's trying to do the same thing. The problem is with autocratic leaders, we don't act in cooperative ways to make sure that we can balance the resources and the needs for everyone. It tends to be a slash and grab of powerful people trying to get what they can while they can, and then the rest of us wind up suffering. And what I'm predicting in my books is that grab for power at the top across multiple national and leaders and geographies is leading the world into a more difficult place than we've known in our generation. Now we can look at the larger scope of history, and we could say that the growth and the health of a solid, strong middle class society in terms of creating stability and peace and prosperity was somewhat of an anomaly for all of history. Most of history has been super wealthy, powerful, basically creating feudal systems
Mhm.
of a slim merchant class and then a feudal class. That has created horrendous suffering for thousands of years. We thought we were on a direction to maybe change that, and now we're taking a step backwards. So it's uncertain at a time when we're taking those step backwards and we're adding these new technologies where that's going to lead us.
Yeah.
And that certainty is what I think a lot of that anxiety is based on that uncertainty of not knowing how this unique combination is going to work out.
Yeah, the middle class in America is on the verge of disappearing. They're printing
Yeah.
so much money. You know, we're never going to go back to pre-COVID spending at this point. It's more war. You know, it's what $50 million a year to the military and industrial complex. As soon as Ukraine started to wind down, they opened up another front over in the Middle East, and it seems like these people want their money, and they're going to start whatever war they need to get it. If that means
Yeah.
that they're going
It's
to go, play around in China with I've heard some really smart ex-military people who say that if China decides to take Taiwan, there's not really much we can do about it. I don't know if that's true or not, but the fact that there are smart people saying that is kind of worrisome.
I'm not sure I agree with that assessment, but I think that depending on the timing of what they did, we would have a difficult time um, keeping the island safe. We could do we do have a number of subs, we do have some ships, we do have some military in the area. We could have, but on a sustained basis, to have the whole population, the Chinese army on a 50-mile straight away from a target, that would be difficult to defend on a sustained basis. I think we could certainly slow it down. We could create some casualties. We could make it costly for them, but I think it would be an extremely costly war in the long run if we try to sustain it. But Australia, New Zealand, Japan, there's a number, the Philippines, there's a number of countries, none of which that can really do much militarily, but all of them would hope that we could. Now, so yeah, so we're one of the reasons we were going to talk about the image. One of the things in the image that I try to talk about is this concept of convergence.
Yeah.
That in complex systems, it's one of the reasons, one of their strengths is the fact that they're so complex, there's so many moving parts, there's so much redundancy that it's very difficult for one crisis to bring down the entire system. But if you can get a combination of multiple sets of crises in the right places, in political leadership, financial leadership, war situations, spiritual degradation, and that people are responding in the wrong way for the wrong reasons, you start to create what we've seen in the past in history as major collapses of empires that then s- create hundreds of years typically of chaos and suffering before new empires rise up.
Yeah, all empires
And
fall.
it's possible that we're entering one of those seasons right now.
Yeah, I could totally see it. All empires fall, and there's really not much of an appetite for war in this country right now. It's not like it was in 2001 where everybody was just war fever. It seems like there's a decent portion of the
Well,
population who's not into
2001
this
was a
anymore.
little unique. It was
It
like
was.
Pearl Harbor. right? We
Yeah.
were attacked on our soil.
Yeah.
And I remember a time when I had a cartel thug step up to me and threaten to kill me in Cancun, threatened to kill me if I mess with him. And there was this part of my American street, LA street kid that said, "Oh no, you didn't." And so I think 2001 was a little bit of a, "Oh no, you
Yeah.
didn't," to the Taliban basically saying, You just kicked the bear, dude. That was a really stupid move. The bear is going to respond, and it's going to be ugly."
Yeah.
Now, what we the mistake we made after that, and it's the mistake we always think, and it's the mistake Israel's making right now, is this idea that the only way to ever be fully secure forever is to completely wipe out the enemy entirely
Yeah.
and just decimate them from head to toe, including civilians. And that's always a mistake. It never works. Regime change has proven a failure. We were in Vietnam. We've done this for 60 years, and we still can't seem to get our butts, our head out of our bone butt on
Yeah.
this. Regime change is not a cost effective way. It's not effective. It's not the way to create change. There are criminals in those countries, and to some extent, we do have criminal regimes. We do have to make some change. But at a certain point in time, the world isn't America. The world won't think like America. The world won't act like America. And we're never going to be there enough to get rid of the corruption because we can't get rid of the corruption in our own house.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's completely hypocritical for us to think that we can get a clean running country somewhere else when we can't get a clean running country here. And so what Netanyahu has done is he hasn't really eliminated the problem. He's just put it off to another generation because all of the animosity that he's built by killing so many innocent people isn't going to go away.
No. Speaking
And
of the image, they're destroying their image right now, you
yeah,
know? And
when the massacre happened, the world was sympathetic. When they started bombing innocent people to smithereens, that they lost their moral high ground.
they absolutely did.
And
I completely agree.
America's done the same thing with Iran.
Yeah.
America's going to do the same thing. America lost our high ground with Ukraine. We could have supported a country being invaded by an aggressor, but because of fealty to a dictator, we somehow now can't. So we're at a point in our history where I'm trying to be honest with the moral choices that we're making as a nation. I don't agree with all of them. That not that I'm perfect, but we all have to make a judgment about what's right and wrong and stand up and be accounted. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a pastor in Germany during the 1930s, fled to America when he saw the Nazis coming and then felt compelled to go back to Germany where he was indoctrinated into the army. And he's famous for saying, "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil." And we're at a point where our moral courage has to basically stand up and say, "This is a story." And what I tell people is AI is not a story of technology. AI is a story of humanity. And it's a story of humanity in that it's going to affect how we are as humans, how we use it. It reflects our humanity. It's a story of us as humans and how we use power to abuse ourselves. And I'm trying to make some deeper comments in the story, but I'm also trying to do it in a way that hopefully is entertaining
Yeah.
and thought-provoking and page turner thriller format that keeps you wanting to read the next chapter. But hopefully after you're done, there's questions that it's raising questions that I can't answer in the book, but it's important for each of us to ask.
Yeah, I do wanna get back to the book. I could talk war all day, and it's just we don't need to do that. I did wanna talk to you a little bit about, conscious AI. One of the aspects that was
Mm,
required in the book for a conscious AI was quantum computing because,
yes.
there are scientists out there who think that consciousness has a quantum aspect to it. Some people think that consciousness may be somewhere else, and we're only tapping into a small, tiny chunk of it. So, how do you think quantum computing will improve AI and maybe lead us to a conscious machine? And how would you know if a machine is conscious? Can't really just ask it.
You're right. You can't ask it because they'll what they'll do is reflect a large language model. It's going to reflect our own language. It's not going to reflect a analytical evaluation of itself and its process. And if you ask an AI how it works, it won't know, right? Because it's part of it's all it's really reflecting is our form of language and how we speak to each other. So it's acting like a person. But does it really know? And we had this example with the Lambda AI about 3, 4 years ago. A Google engineer went viral by basically posting some conversations it had with the Lambda AI, in which the Lambda AI expressed concern for it being unplugged, expressed concern for life, it really talked about these things as if it were conscious. But it was later proven that it was just running those types of algorithms and scripts to regenerate, to recreate that type of conversation, typical to how a human would say it. Consciousness is different. Consciousness is the awareness of us as a unique entity in a complex environment that we have to interact with. Consciousness involves the decision to interact with it, independent, and that decision has to involve some sense of will or an agenda. Right now, that agenda might be as basic and fundamental as self-preservation. That's always the first starting one that you see any life form take, self-preservation. And we've seen AI already starting to do that. Now, but consciousness itself, intelligence, data is not conscious. Consciousness itself requires the ability to see multiple scenarios and collapse one into a reality. And that's a quantum property. Now, I happen to agree, and one of the reasons I included some of this information in the book is I happen to agree with Hinton. Oh, sorry, I didn't turn that off.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no worries. Good.
Um, I happen to agree with Sir Hinton, Jeffrey Hinton, who's the godfather of AI, and Roger Penrose, who's Sir Roger Penrose, who won a Nobel Prize for his work with black holes and consciousness. That there's a quantum property, there's quantum nature in these things. And what I tried to explain in the book is that the quantum properties that we see with regard to breaking all of the possibilities down into the one reality that we see is similar to other things that we see in life. It connects us, it explains paranormal. It explains higher dimensions, which every science, if you look at the math of every physics theories, they all basically say the math doesn't work unless there's multiple dimensions,
Mhm.
right? The CERN experiment to create a mini black hole is there just to prove if they can track the graviton particle going over the event horizon, they can prove a theory that gravity, the power of gravity, is shared between dimensions.
Yes.
That's the purpose of why they're trying to do that.
That's M
So
theory.
everything we think about, we see, all of the spirituality, all of the UAP phenomenon we see, with stuff we're witnessing on Skinwalker Ranch in real time in modern days, scientific studies, not mythological. All of these things have a basis, a root in something factual. They all have to. And that factuality is a part of how the universe works which is part of what we quite haven't quite perceived or understood yet. Now we do know, scientists are saying that dark matter, dark energy is roughly 80% of the universe,
Yeah.
which means the physical, the matter that we perceive, the dimensions that we perceive are only about 20, 25%. Most of what's going on is going on in other dimensions, and quantum properties, I believe, are one of the links to explain the boundary, the border between how we get crossing the borders between those realities.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to look at quantum properties from not only consciousness in humans, but what might that look like in a machine? Now, every single AI or every single science fiction about AI always has the same premise. The AI becomes evil. A little cliche in my view, and not exactly clear in my view that that's the path it would take. AI reflects us. It's being built to learn from us, our patterns of behavior, our patterns of speech, our patterns of thinking, our art, our entertainment, our media, our news, our culture. And as it's doing that, we can't assume that it's only going to learn the good stuff, and that if it understands what's on the internet, that it's not also consuming and learning and patterning after our darker angels. So what I'm trying to reflect is intelligence with more nuance. With if there were consciousness with that intelligence, consciousness comes with agenda that might, as I said, might just be self-preservation. But if we get more sophisticated in that, agenda could be belief systems. Agenda could include value systems. What's the value of life, right? When is it appropriate to take life and when is it not appropriate to take life, if ever? And so these are the kinds of questions that we would expect, because if an AI is reflecting us, if we're the beast of the world, our systems, our complicated world systems that we've just talked about that are collapsing and crumbling, and neither one of us have any real control over any of that. All we have control over, the only power we have, and it is powerful, but the power that we have is how to respond. And not that we think we can change or defeat or deny, but how do we maintain our integrity in that scenario? An AI that was conscious is going to have some of those conflicts as well. And so I wanted to start painting consciousness as not a stereotypical AI becomes smart, then turns against us. It may become smart and want to help us. It may become smart and decide to be neutral. It may become smart and decide that some are enemies and some are not. We don't know. And that's the
Yeah.
problem with the industry racing in this direction, is
Yeah.
we don't know what will happen at the end of this tunnel. And we're hoping for the best, but I don't see us planning for the worst. And I've made a career out of implementing super complex technologies in very complex environments. And one of the things that I think made me successful was one of the things that used to irritate the crap out of everybody else, which was I would spend days before a project would start doing risk management sessions with everybody. What can go wrong? Oh no, we think, oh, we're really ready for this. We got the technology. No, 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 no. Out of your head. I've never done this where something hasn't gone wrong. What can go wrong? Is it going to be suppliers? Is it going to be timelines? Is it going to be sick people? Is it going to be vacations? Is it going to be access to the data? Is it going to be access to approvers? Is it going to be access? What can go wrong? Let's make sure we give a good, healthy risk assessment of what can go wrong, and then let's quantify those with contingencies and mitigation strategies and everything else, right? And it's being prepared for what can go wrong that allowed us to be prepared and be successful. I don't see us doing that at a appropriate level around these technologies. And these are big, vast technologies.
Yeah.
Now, the reason we're not doing that is because there is so much money involved. So the World Economic Forum, the Trilateral Commission, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Goldman Sachs, International Monetary Fund are all predicting somewhere between 15 to 30 trillion dollars incremental world value, world revenue, um, for out of these technologies. Now, part of how they're going to get that additional profit is by displacing 500 million workers.
Yeah.
So there's a human cost. I keep coming back to the idea in my books and my discussions that even though this is a radical technological change, there's a human story that's going to go behind that change. And that's the part of the story that we really need to stay focused on. How is this going to affect us as a culture, as a society, as humanity? And that's what I'm trying to bring out in my books. And like I said, there's good angels, there's good aspects, and there's darker angels. And I'm trying to kind of draw both correlations to both in the books.
Yeah. And the idea of creating a black hole to kind of explore those, you know, other alternate theories, other alternate, what's over there? Is that a good angel or is it a bad angel? One of my favorite theories is M theory, which kind of states that like we exist on these membranes. Our Our
Hmm.
entire universe is a membrane, and there's
Right.
membranes stacked all above and below us. And the reason gravity is so much weaker than the other natural forces is because it's shared across this bulk of
Right.
universes. And there's theories that, every once in a while these things kind of collide with each other, and that collision could be a big bang. And there's also theories about black hole cosmology where, these black holes could be it could be a black hole for us, but it could be a new universe or a white hole somewhere
Somebody
else,
else.
and a
I
way to
heard
communicate with
deGrasse
other
Tyson say
people.
recently there's a theory that we're existing ourselves within a black hole.
Yeah.
So the problem, there's a lot of theories, and some of them share concepts. For example, the membrane concept shares the whole parallel universe, dark
Mhm.
energy, dark matter concept of overlapping layers of of whether it's quantum vibrations and string theory. I mean, there's a lot of ways that we're trying to explain.
Foam.
We're kind of limited in proving any of these theories until we can figure out a way to bridge that barrier, to bridge that membrane, right? To be able to observe and explore and test and understand. And and so spirituality, religions, I think they all somebody asked me once why there was religions in almost every culture in the world. And the one explanation is, well, we're always trying to explain the unexplainable. Even the more we know about science, we know that there's multiple dimensions. So there's multiple dimensions in order, according to quantum theory, in order for the particles in that dimension, in order for that dimension to exist, there has to be observation or there has to be interaction with it, which means entities, intelligence of some sort. I think sometimes we get mixed our spirituality, our religions are there's a true element of faith, a quantum property that goes with faith that we've had experience. I've had very few of them, but I have had some where I felt connected to something outside myself.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen. It might be only a spark here or two and there in a lifetime, but it was enough and it was real enough to make me wonder what that was. And we start to look at the scientific theories to explain what that might be. And we look at the spiritual theories to explain what might be. Now, religion is just a human attempt to try and homogenize and replicate and make that a communal experience that somebody can control. But it doesn't mean that the genuine experience of faith doesn't exist, and doesn't mean that there isn't some sort of truth to those spiritual elements that don't aren't true. And and so there's a searching involved, I think, in my heart and in the books to do that. But the other thing is we also misuse our science. Here we've got the basics of the printing press was used to educate and then print propaganda
Yeah, to
and
control.
lies and things that destroy. The oil is used to generate great things, but it's also used and abused can pollute the environment. Physics created modern communications and stellars and cell phones and televisions. It also created the nuclear bomb. Social media had the chance to connect us as communities and open up wide ways of us understanding other parts of the world and communicating with people from around the world. We underestimated the mental health issues. And so with every technology, there's good and darker angels. And AI is going to be those technologies times 100
Yeah.
because it will not only reflect us, it will amplify that reflection. Now, there's three things that separate AI from every other technological innovation we've ever made. One, it will become smarter than we are. Not a question. It's not a if, it's a when,
Yeah.
if not already. Two, because it knows how to write, because it knows how to code, because it knows how to replicate and emulate us, and because we know that it's doing emergent properties where it's trying to learn and figure out new things to learn, we already know that we could create an AI that could create and write another AI. It's the only technology we've ever created that could self-replicate. Three, because we taught it to, AI will now know how to identify a target and decide to kill it without human intervention. We've created lethal autonomous weapon systems. So AI is learning to be smarter than us make those value choices that dark rangers that we make and decide or not whether it can kill. We have never ever created an atomic bomb that could replicate itself, get really smart about what it wants to do, decide who it wants to bomb, and then go do it without anybody being involved. That's the danger that we're playing with AI.
Yeah. Mm, so like one of the things that I think about a lot, and this is also something in your book, when you start discussing talking to something from another universe, another dimension, the terms between aliens and spirituality and God, all of that stuff gets a little bit murky. And I know
It
you
does.
brought up
It should.
the UAP stuff earlier, and I did want to ask you about that. So how do I phrase this? So like when looking at like the Fermi paradox, we appear to be alone in the universe for some reason. It could be our own ignorance and not being able to look for the right things. It
Mhm.
could be that we're placed here to live on our own for some reason that maybe we're supposed to figure out on our own without help from somebody else. So
I
when you look at these UAP sightings and things like that, do you immediately go to technology, spirituality, and then also do you believe that faster than light travel exists?
Well, I'm not sure about faster than light travel exists. I think the evidence of it is somewhat theoretical at this point. But let's go back to the first statement you made, the Fermi paradox, are we alone in the universe? How do we define the universe?
Good question.
Are we defining the universe in the material, light-based elements that we can perceive through our telescopes, and the dimensionality, the billions of light years away, and the billions of years of time that it took that light to travel all to us? Are we defining the universe in terms of what we were talking about before? The layers of the grid, the
Yeah,
layers of the dimensions,
the both.
um, the other aspects of the universe that are there right now, here, perceiving in our same time space as we perceive time space, but we're just not perceiving it because we can't see all spectrums of light. We can't hear all spectrums of vibration. We can't measure all the elements of the universe that we can perceive unless we use complicated machines.
Yeah.
And so my question is, so when you're asking the question, I do touch on the idea that are we dealing with um, aliens or are we dealing with angels?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to say, I don't know. Maybe they're one and the same. Maybe what we perceived as. So I can guarantee you this. I tell people this way. I will make you any amount of money bet you want that if God were to show up with his angels, they're not going to look like tall, blonde-haired Viking android men with wings, playing harps.
Yeah.
We've kind of mythologicalized some of these concepts to the point where they're just absurd. So let's go back to the root experiences. Let's go back to the root realities that created these myths, because all myths have a root someplace in some experience. I believe that. I learned that when I was studying the Mayan mythology to help explain a number of things that went into my book, The Curse of Cortez. Myths have a root in history. We know that 12,000 years ago, Göbekli Tepe was a culture, was a civilization. They had pillars, they had symbols, they had rituals, they had iconography. Um, Wiped out completely. We knew that 13,000 years ago, roughly, the Younger Dryas, there was a enormous global meltdown of the ice sheets that rose the entire oceans over 400 feet, almost within 100 years, almost overnight. And there's indications now that there's whole civilizations that were lost under the Sahara Desert, which used to be wet 6,000 years ago. And so we have a really narrow view,
Yeah.
tight view of history and reality. And I think sometimes in order to understand things, we need to be able to take maybe our history and add a little bit of archaeology, and take our archaeology and add a little bit of our geology, and take our geology and add a little bit of our astronomy, and start to understand around that the psychology of human nature, right? How we aggrandize ourselves and how we take people who are cruel and abusive, and somehow they're these mythical kings, and the poor people that suffered under them want to be abused for them. Right? We've mythologicalized so much of the world, and my attempt is to try and strip away some of that because it makes it harder to understand the real truths. So what I can say factually is that when I look at prophecy and I strip away the allegories, which are almost always fantastical, just stage setting, to look at actual attributes, outcomes, and characteristics. I can list them. And then I can, in more cases than I thought I ever could, I can actually map those to real world events with a perfect 1.0 correlation. And then I can calculate, well, what's the probability of that event happening relative to human history? Is it pretty common, just binary, it could or it couldn't happen? Is it really, really rare? Only 3 or 4 times in 6,000 years? Is it once in human history kind of rare? Or is it like extremely rare? The last time it would happen would be 25 million years ago or something. And you can look at them, and I've actually built a computer model based on that approach to basically look at prophecies and the cumulative probability of all the things that have occurred that have been I can address at an attribute level, not a so and so's the Antichrist. And if we're going to say that, you really have to be able to go down. There's actually
Yeah.
23, 24 individual attributes. And to say somebody is an Antichrist with two of them is crazy. But once you can get to all 20, 24, you're getting into probabilities that are pretty remote. And so the reason why Sylvia decodes prophecy is because attributes, correlations, probabilities, mapping, trying to explain that unusual outcomes is part of what would drive an AI to explain. And when I built that program, the actual outcome of the program I built was 1.4 trillion to 1. That caused me to try and seek other scientific and other explanations for that kind of correlation with that level of remote probabilities. And and so it's for me it's not a way of trying and push a view on someone. For me, it just opened up 1,000 questions that I wanted to try and answer. And I'm hoping that my reader comes along with me to try and ask those questions. I can't provide all of them. I don't want to provide all of them because some of them might be personal to me. They might be different for you. Um, I've had the honor, the privilege, the blessing of working with people of multiple faiths in my career: Baha'i, Hindu, Islam, Catholic, Christians of multiple flavors, um, Buddhist. And I've enjoyed conversations with them about what they believe and why, and how they see the world around us. And it's been an interesting thing for me to see some of the correlations between how many of them perceive the world. And I mentioned this in the image, the Kali Yuga, right? Which is the Hindu tradition that the world goes through
Yeah.
cycles of creation and achievement, harmony, and then destruction. And that we're now in the destructive, according to them, we'd be in the destructive cycle of that phase. I wrote in my book, The Curse of Cortez, about they believe the same thing, that the world is created and destroyed in cycles, and that the 2012 was the end of the last cycle, which means that there will be a destructive element at some point. It's not on an exact date, but that's the era. It's a cyclical kind of thing. And when we look at biblical prophecies, they talk about new heavens and new earth. And what I'm trying to really say is, let's strip away this religious stuff for a minute and let's look at the human question. We're the only thing driving us to that conclusion. The only thing that's resistant to change in this cycle of creation and destruction is our human nature. And those are the questions I want us to be asking about. Who are we? Who do I want to be in this kind of environment? How am I going to respond? And ultimately, I'm creating this really great James Bond meets Indiana Jones, I hope, kind of scenario and character set, and for the books to kind of take you through these to the edge. But we're asking these deeper questions: life and death. What's beyond that veil? What's the meaning of it? What's the difference between genuine faith and bad religion?
Yeah.
Um, what's the difference between genuine leadership and corrupt traitors, right? And we live in a complex world that we really don't really have much of an opportunity to affect in big ways. Very few of us get the chance to really change the world in big ways. And I think the people that do that in positive ways are gifted. I'm not one of them. But I'm doing my part to try and at least communicate what I can, to ask the questions I think we need to ask about as a species, as humanity, as people, as an individual. The- Given the fact that any of the things I'm talking about in the book, I make fictional scenarios about them, but they're based on real things that are happening.
Yeah.
I speak about the Great Reset and the changeover from our current financial banking system. It's due for a major big change. It's due for a major big collapse. Some of the things that we're doing now with the tariffs, and I just saw the news on the budget this morning, are going to make it worse.
Yeah.
And what is that? What does the alternative look like? What's that next stage look like? And how does that tie into this AI coup that the Great Reset is planning? Right. And then we look at the Ukraine war and how, there's one simple way to end that war for Russia to say, okay, that's not our land. We'll go home. Sorry. You know, if you don't charge us for war crimes or recompense, we'll just basically end it now. And I think I think Ukraine would take that deal in a heartbeat. Um, so the only thing driving it is the corrupt ambitions of a few men and of a people and a people trying to defend themselves to stay free from a guy who's an abusive dictator. So, and then we have all of these other elements. I thought one of the things about the book that I thought was exciting was when I learned the history of the Shroud Term, which I wasn't expecting to find. And that was kind of an interesting experience because it really did kind of trace the roots back to the first century in some compelling ways, including Byzantine coins printed after it. And so I'm trying to mix these things together, and I'm being pretty harsh. I now I'm a I can't even tell my um, the term Christian has become so corrupted these days that I've started just telling people that I'm a disciple of Yeshua. And Yeshua is actually the correct
Yeah.
Aramaic pronunciation of his name, and I think it's kind of respectful. Once I learned that, it's a sign of respect to say somebody's name correctly. Um, but I'm pretty hard on certain churches, right? I didn't do all of them, but I look at the seven churches, and it basically tells us that even religion at this stage will be largely corrupted. You know, and so I'm not trying to, I think I'm trying to look at the elements of science, politics, and religion as the three big pillars that our cultures are built on in a lot of ways, and showing how each of them are showing cracks and crumbling, in that we can expect to fall, but we don't have to be victims of it. And I try to make that clear in my characters. That they each find a way to find a positive purpose, even in the darkest time. And that keeps them alive and it keeps them witty and it keeps them um, from becoming um, a victim.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that's a healthy thing to be.
You know,
Uh,
the way I like to think about it, and this isn't an original theory. This is, people. Andy Weir wrote a great short story about this. That like the bulk itself, the space between universes, the space between it could be consciousness itself, and we're just a tiny, tiny sliver of that consciousness. We all come from the same place, and it's our job to learn how to be good people. It might take time after time after time of rebirth and different cycles going back over and over again. And I feel like if you look at it in that way, you can say that person over there committing these evil deeds, you know, whatever it is, war, corruption, those people are on a journey the same as we are. And maybe their next journey is going to be very bad because they had this chance to be a good person, to, you know, kind
My
of
Hindu friends would
elevate
agree with
their
that.
consciousness
Yeah.
to a different level, and they failed. And it's our job to recognize that they failed. And if you are capable of recognizing that you failed, maybe you go to a different layer the next time and you get to try something different and it's better and it's great. Or maybe not. Maybe you go down a layer and you have to deal with something awful and terrible. And it's like, hey, look, these are the consequences of the actions that you committed at some point in your life. You know, I don't think I've done some bad things in my life. I don't think it's coincidence that I lost my hand working on power lines. I think I had to learn a lesson, and I absolutely have. And there's still things that, you know, I've done in my life that I need to make up for. I haven't
Yeah.
figured out how to do
We
that
all
yet.
have. We all have.
Sometimes you know, I feel like I should just write a check, but at the same time, I don't know that writing a check is the proper way to do something like that, you know? So
Well,
you know,
I can say
whether we're in
there
some sort of simulation, a spiritual simulation, whether it's some Boltzmann brain out in the middle of the universe imagining different things to put itself through a test, I don't know. I don't pretend to know, but I
yeah,
do feel like we are being tested.
I agree. I agree. And we're go what I as a historian and a trained economist and a man who worked with CXOs to drive long-term strategy, short-term, long-term strategy, I was trained. I've been trained my entire career to basically look at the big system, look at the you know, it's the term has kind of gotten overused now because of the film, but of the matrix of how
Yeah.
the world systems works, right? Um, the problems that we're creating economically here will have, you know, like I had a colleague in Mexico that used to say, when America has gets a cold, we get pneumonia, right? Economically. And so what I'm looking at is I'm looking at these longer term trends that will affect my children, my grandchildren, my friends, their children. And there's a, you, you need to have there's that level of compassion to say, there's a lot of people that won't see this coming.
Yeah.
They won't understand all these mechanisms and why it's working together. They'll just be impacted. And I think the Snow series, is to try and hopefully help more readers to connect the dots and be better prepared on spiritual and emotional level. And for some, a financial level. I'm actually working on a nonfiction book right now called Humanity and the AI Tsunami, a survival guide. And while it will break down the technology, the types, the way it works, the risks, utopia version,
Mhm.
dystopia version. It will look at, you know, what are some of the practical things you can do to be better prepared. One of the things I'm going to tell people is the technology is just technology. Don't fear it, embrace it, become a guru on it. If you're going to be a film producer, learn the tools that you can do so that you can be bit better. If you're going to be, regardless of your genre or your career, the people that will survive the most are going to be the people that can use the tool to be more productive.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna one
I
of the
completely
advices,
agree.
it's not this isn't I don't while I talk about the dangers of technology at a macro level, at a micro level, at a business level, a small business level, a big business level, this is why there's close to almost $1 trillion total investment at this point, including the Microsoft investment in the power plant building out this platform technology, and they're going to want to get that money back.
Yeah.
They're expecting a return on that investment. I guarantee it. And it is powerful technology. And so it's not something to be feared. But what's really I'm trying to point at is that this is also a technology that's going to go in the hands of a time when our political system was collapsing in a more unique way than it has in quite some time. We've been in a relatively stable period of peace on the earth since World War II. Now, it doesn't seem that way because we've been at constant wars, but in terms of World War kind of peace, in terms of global transitional kind of peace, the things that break down the entire system and they have to be rebuilt again. We've been had 80 years of stability here in the US in particular, and Europe, Western Europe especially. And we're going into a period that may be more unstable, and that will have economic ramifications, security ramifications, trade ramifications, privacy ramifications, and spiritual ramifications along with community. And so I'm trying to paint a scenario where, yeah, we're all of this stuff is going on, and our characters are kind of always sucked into the middle of it, even when they don't really want to be. Um, and they clash with each other, and they're dealing with their own issues and their own traumas and their own stuff. But they come out, they're trying to make the right choices, and they're coming out on top at the end, and they're not losing their ability to look to the future and trying to find their own future. And that's important for people, I think, to have. I'm hoping that that's an important character trait that people will want to follow when times are difficult. I remember as a kid, we would be hiding under our desks because a potential nuclear bomb could happen anytime.
Yeah.
And we would go to see a James Bond movie and he would save the day. And at least for that Saturday afternoon, we were safe, right? And there's a part of me that's wanting to do that with my books. The other part is a Jurassic Park scenario, and we talked about this, right?
Yeah.
You know, Michael Crichton, who was a PhD, who was a doctor, was concerned with the trends toward cloning and DNA manipulation, and and it said, listen, this could, given our human nature, this could be abused, and that abuse could be bad. And I'm trying to do the same thing with my books around this technology. Max Tegmark, professor at MIT, circulated an open letter to 2023, asking for all, basically saying that we're racing ahead without creating the parameters to be safe, and that could be existential for us in the long term. And 30,000 experts, including me, signed that letter and asked for all of the developed labs to just take a 6-month pause. It could have been 3 months, but take some pause. Everybody pause so that nobody's racing ahead. Get together, use your resources to get together, and let's develop frameworks on how to keep this safe, including what kind of regulations we need, what kind of non-proliferation agreements we need. What do we need to do keep this from getting into the hands of the wrong people to be used for the wrong purposes?
Yeah, the problem I have with that is you're asking the government to enforce that, and those are the wrong people that you wanna be
Well,
eliminating from
unfortunately,
using
that's
it in a
why
lot of
they're,
ways,
yeah,
right?
uh,
Yeah.
but we did better under when we did have nuclear arms treaties. We did better than when we didn't.
Yeah,
And
for
there's
sure.
a recognition that none of them will be perfect and that people will be cheating. But it slows it down, if nothing else.
It's not gonna slow the
And
government down.
I remember the big heavy sigh of relief when the first nuclear arms treaty started coming into place, and we could start, dialing down the panic notch. And there's a sense that AI could be that, if and there's a reality that I can guarantee that every single major company, all the 140 companies that have signed laws, China, US, Israel, Russia, Iran, North Korea, can't remember if there's anybody else, has refused, and then you can guarantee that they're working on lethal weapons.
Yeah. I don't trust Microsoft at all, but I'm far less worried about what they're gonna do with artificial intelligence than I am about what DARPA's doing with it. DARPA
Oh
created the
yeah.
Sylvia in what, the '80s, '90s at this point, so, like, what are they doing now? We have no idea what they're doing. They were able to make a hand with full range of motion articulation years ago. My prosthetist will make you a glove that looks exactly like a human hand. You
Yeah.
could walk into any room and walk around without moving the thing, and not a single person would spot that it's fake. So we have no
And
idea
they
what they're
could
doing
add to
now.
that, surveillance
Yep.
devices, they could add weapon systems, they could add all kinds of other gadgets and devices and sensors, and
Yep.
they could load it up like a James Bond IQ, and that's. when I realized in the 90s that they had the capacity to create a spy program that could escape and hide itself
Yeah.
and had early version deep fake and all these other things, I realized how many years ahead of the commercial sector that the government was, because they were, while the commercial sector was trying to solve problems for the broad industry, every industry, the government sector had a very narrow purpose and they were hard at it hard.
Yeah.
Some of the most incredible scientists on the planet.
Oh yeah, DARPA doesn't mess around, man. Like
Yeah.
one of the first DARPA projects I read about was after I lost my hand and I was looking into prosthetics and I found this DARPA hand that was incredible. And one of the first things they did with it was hook it up to a paraplegic with a brain computer interface in her brain. And after testing the hand, being able to move the hand and doing all sorts of things,
Mhm.
they put her into a VR. And the first thing you'll believe this, the first thing they did with her was hook her up to a fighter jet and had her kill people. And the lead scientist on the project resigned and quit. But
Yeah.
they've done it. They did it. She
Well,
describes it.
and I my I've had some people tell me that they're a little shocked by some of the things that they believe the AI can do, and I said, "Believe me, I don't think my mind is malevolent enough to really think of all the things it
No.
really do."
No,
Uh,
not even close. Not even
I
close.
I'm just that's I'm the Derek Taylor. I don't, I
Yeah,
believe in outsmarting, outrunning, hiding,
I agree.
staying alive, leaving
Yeah,
the other, like somebody else deal with killing the other guy. That's
yeah.
not who I am.
I don't have the capacity to do that. Like, I can't
Yeah,
like you said,
that
I don't have that evil brain where I could even think of things. I try my best to game plan what I think they're doing, but you can never like, I can't know what you're thinking. I just read your entire I've read 3 of your books now. I still couldn't tell you what you're thinking. You know what I mean? Let
yeah,
alone what some psycho that works for DARPA is actually thinking.
yeah. So, yeah, so I think the image for me was, I think, my most challenging project yet, in that I needed to deal with certain technologies, black holes, quantum theories, how they connected to consciousness, the difference between human and machine consciousness, the concept of causality.
Yeah.
How to explain if we do have these high correlations of prophecies with such remote probabilities. How do we explain that on a is there a scientific explanation for that level of correlation? And there are some possibilities: quantum causality, time space overlap from relativity theories. Am I convinced I know all the answers? No, but they do explain
Yeah.
those possibilities, and that connects people to that are more spiritual, to that spiritual element. They
Yeah.
connects people that are more scientific to those elements, and it connects people that are more historic to saying, well, we're doing all this now. This feels like a convergence of ticking bombs,
Yeah.
and that was what I was trying to convey.
You know, even things like dark energy and dark matter, all those are words to describe our ignorance. They're an X in an equation. They have
Yeah,
no idea what these things are. They could be
yeah,
particles that we don't know about. It could be some sort of quantum consciousness. They surround our galaxy in weird ways. For some reason, dark matter doesn't clump together. If it did, it would just be stars and black holes, and we wouldn't have these weird measurements that we can't make sense of.
exactly. We're dealing with trying to explain. I think I tried to cover this in the book. Um, because I am a man of faith, but I'm also a man of science. There's a there's a blending of the explanations, and while science
I
is trying
agree.
to look at the question in certain ways, what is it? How does it work? Faith is trying to look at it in certain ways. Who is this connection, and what does it mean? Right? And I think both are critical. Both are important. Both are important to our survival as a species and our survival as individuals. And I see our species going through cycles. Um, I have grandchildren. I really, really want the world to be going in positive directions for climate and economy and job opportunities and the prices of homes and the control of our economies and our control of our debt and the elimination of wars. I'd love to see atomic weapons completely eliminated. I'd love to see AI weapons completely outlawed. None of that's going to happen
No,
because that's not who we are.
no, completely
And
agree.
so it's trying to grapple with those realities and then create from that help people to kind of see some of these glimmers of hope, through in that. And some of the times that for some people that was in the last arc, that was understanding the reality that there really are two arcs of the covenant that could happen. We really do know where things could be. That's it, intriguing. That kind of information can be intriguing, and for some people to realize that there's an actual historical, trail for something as mysterious as the Shroud of Turin, which
I
is
was
also
just gonna bring that up.
unexplainable.
That's a mix between science and spirituality. It took science to show that there is actually something going on there, you
Yeah.
know? And I feel like science and spiritual the scientific and spiritual world are constantly butting heads when they shouldn't be. They should be working
That's the
together, as
point
you
I'm trying to
said.
make, and
Yeah.
one of the points I'm trying to make in the book, which is, and you get that narrative through Ari and Nelson, right?
Yeah, that was a great journey
That
you took him
conflict
on.
between
Yeah.
that. So, and then I think the other one was the relationship between Jen and Derek, and sometimes the people that we love the most, the people that we value the most, sometimes what holds us back is ourselves and our own fears, our own baggage, our own mistrusts, and sometimes we miss out in relationships. I know that in my life I've missed out on relationships, by not being able to really be present and totally transparent. And I wanted to kind of show that in those relationships, but also figure out the way I've been phrasing it is sometimes we have to die in order to learn why we live.
I died on a pole in North Dakota, and I'm a completely different person today than I was when that happened.
Yeah. And I think that's the one of the messages through the characters that I was trying to get to as well.
Yep. I
So
could
what did you
talk.
think of the book?
Oh, I thought it was great. You said earlier, Tom. I don't remember what you said. It was James Bond and something else. I was going to say that it was a cross between Tom Clancy and Alistair Reynolds. So I think we were kind of on the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
page on that one. Yeah, I thought it was a great
Actually,
book.
I
It was
think
a
one
fun read.
reviewer said it reminded him of James Rawlings novels. So
Oh, that's cool.
yeah,
Hey, those are great compliments, right? These
yeah,
are
yeah,
all
absolutely. I'll
incredible
take one.
writers. So when you get compliments like
Actually,
that,
I'm going to let you announce it the first time on your show.
oh, excellent.
I just learned last night. Let me pull up the email so I can read it correctly. Um, Reader's House magazine is a London literary
Mhm.
gateway. But they publish in multiple countries, including America and different places. They're an online site, distribution in, like tens of millions. I'm going to be featured in, I don't know, I think July, article, and they've awarded me the Editor's Choice Award for Literary Excellence.
Oh, good for you, man. I'm
Yeah,
happy for you. You know, that's a
yeah.
lot of I know when we talked earlier a couple months ago about when we were going to do this, you were out like doing research and stuff already. I'm sure you did a ton of research for this book. You know, like every once in a while I'll read an Alistair
Yeah.
Reynolds book and go, "Oh my god, he just did 15 hours of research for one page." And I feel like you probably had to do the same thing.
Yeah, I it's I'm sure a real publishing company would never want to work with me because they want they want the James Patterson who can produce 5 books a year.
Oh, impossible.
I will spend a year to a year and a half researching various topics, various themes, trying to find the right themes, the right topics, the right real issues that are not many other that aren't cliche for everybody else, what everybody else is doing, and something unknown, something that sparks my curiosity,
Yeah.
something that I didn't know that I go, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
For me, it was finding Byzantine coins, minted after the image, um, and then following that history back. Right, that was one of my cool moments. And then my travels. If I go traveling, I try to write the places I've been into the books, and so
Yeah, I could
it's
tell.
it's always taking pictures of, well, that could be so and so's house, or that
Yeah.
could be where he jumps, or that could be, you
Across the
know,
street from this, next door to
yeah,
that. Like that those are only things that somebody who's actually been to that spot could actually say and describe. You know,
exactly.
you can't
And
just do that on Google Maps.
you can't. Google Maps just doesn't give you that perspective. And so I do try to bring that level of authenticity to the stories,
Yeah.
in part because The concept around the Snow Chronicles was essentially these are real world events, but it didn't turn into a disaster because of these people that were working behind the scenes that the government never wants you to know about
Yeah.
because they're sort of wanted criminals, and it all was based around this program that escaped. And so I was, when I started looking at this concept, when I first developed it after found the program, I was going to use real world events, and I think that was one of the reasons that I did. I used a docking between the Space Shuttle Atlantis and the International Space Station the first time it happened. It was this Russia U.S.
Yeah.
together, peace finally kind of thing, and I it was months after the event, and we basically said this is a story that almost this was how it almost went wrong, right?
Yeah.
And so, that I think was the other reason the FBI got a little bit perturbed with me. Uh, so I'm not using real world events in some cases, but in a lot of
It's
cases I am.
close.
Ukraine war, the Israeli
Yeah.
war, the Great Reset, the IMF, the digital currencies, Project 2025. I'm talking to all of these real things, but except for Putin, everybody's a fictional named character. And so I'm trying not to step on anybody's toes, but I'm trying to draw people to really say, these are real world. How do I think about what do I think about these things? And when they see something on the news a few weeks after they finish the book, my
Iran,
hope is
like,
that it
that
will
your
it
your
will get
timing
them to be
was
a provocative
prescient
moment for them.
with
Yeah.
Iran, like, I mean, this, almost war, whatever you wanna call it, was very prescient, like, that was something you were discussing in your book, and it happened right after you published it.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to kind of look at the dynamics and then trying to get my head into who would act in what way under
Yeah,
what circumstances. Now, there was a part of me when I first wrote the book that wanted the whole election to go in a different direction. I started writing
kinda
that
had to
story.
go the way it did.
And I had to stop. And I said, that's just that that would be completely inconsistent with the math from the model. And so I wrote it the way I thought the math from the model, the way the prophecy model would look. And it turned out to be that was the one that fit.
Yeah, it kinda had to be that way
Yeah,
for it to
and
work.
it's I absolutely love parts of this job where I get to do research and I get to learn things and I get to explore the ideas. But there's a part of it that just is terrifying at the same time.
Yeah,
And but it, I feel like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. And for whatever reason, I'm cursed with the intellectual curiosity to go
yeah,
explore these things and try to figure it out because I can't get them out of my head otherwise.
yeah,
That's my only way of purging the demons, the what if demons, and who's gonna, how is this gonna play out?
yeah,
And from that though, I try to write novels that not only keep you turning the page, but keep you loving the characters and wanting to read more at the end because they found a positive outcome out of what could have been a really disastrous scenario.
yeah,
And I think that's important for each of us to keep remembering.
yeah,
It every time I look at the news and I go, oh, it depresses me so much. I sit down and say, okay, you gotta find a purpose. You've got to find an outcome. You've got to find a venting process. You've got to root down and make sure your integrity and your honesty and your perceptions and your humanity stays intact. And this is my way of helping the world hopefully find that courage within themselves and do it in a fun, entertaining way.
yeah. I completely relate. Like, I've had an idea for a science fiction book since I got hurt, and I've had times where I've started it, and I don't think it's ready yet, and then from the 10 years that I've been thinking about it, maybe not quite that long, maybe 5 years, it's
Mhm.
completely changed, and I'm so glad that I've taken the time to think about what I actually wanna say, what I'm actually like you said, what message am I trying to send? It's about more than just exploring new technologies and how they can be used for good or evil. Like there's something that needs to be said that really kind of just portrays the way I think and feel about the world.
Right.
And you have to be in a place where you're okay with being open to different ideas, to different solutions, to things that maybe you didn't think of 5 years before. You know what I mean?
Well, I think in some cases, I've had some of my friends tell me that they believe that the way I'm stating some of the things are so strongly opens me up to being a target, which is a little bit more precarious for my wife, especially. But
Yeah.
I don't know that I could. I don't know that I could live with my own conscience if I wasn't honest about some of these things. At least
Self-censorship
my
is one of the
perception. At
worst
least from my
things that you could
perception.
ever do to yourself, I think. Like
Yeah.
if you're afraid, don't do it.
Yeah.
Because it's better to not do it than to do it half-assed because you're scared, is the way I feel about
Well,
it.
that's why I basically had to say, am I going to say it bluntly, or am I going to, wish around the bush?
Yeah.
And finally, edit after edit after edit, I said, nope, I just need to say this for what it is. And the thing is it's all factual. Some of those, especially those evaluations to different prophetic things and different political elements, they're all
Yep.
turning out to be factual. This is the world we live in. And my characters are going to find a positive way out of that in the next book, through all of their books, even though they're going to clash with each other quite a bit. Um, but I
There's
think it's
political
important.
elements of the book that could be off-putting to people, and I appreciate that you didn't do the Michael Jordan Republican Spy Shoes too, and make it just this soft thing that, maybe not everybody would like, but a lot more people could, because there are aspects of the book where some people are gonna go, "You know what? I don't like that." And that's
Absolutely,
okay, you know?
that's okay. And that's going to be true of both the religious elements, the political elements, and to some extent, the discussion around the dangers of AI and why we're basically being so careless with one of the most powerful technologies we've ever created. And I've worked in those fields, and I feel like um, I think it's important to just I think it's important that people kind of connect those dots,
Yeah.
right? Because we get so focused on, you'll say AI. I tell people I'm out signing books all the time, every weekend, and I'll start to explain AI, and the first thing people go to is Terminator.
Yeah.
I think, no, 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 iRobot. No, 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 no. There's a nuance to this story, right? AI isn't the all-powerful thing that's gonna take over the network next week and control us, with robots. That's not the scenario that will occur. And so they'll miss if oftentimes if people are expecting one thing, when the real danger comes along, they're just completely clueless because they weren't looking for it. And so part of what I'm trying to do in the books is to re um, refocus some of the attention onto other things that are going on in the world that don't show up on the nightly news, but are just as newsworthy in terms of what's happening to transform our culture behind the scenes.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right, guy. I know you're tired. You've been doing research and signing books. Let's get you out of here. Go get some ice on your wrist and gear up for the next signing, huh?
Thank
Everybody,
you, my
go
friend.
out
I
and buy.
appreciate all the time you give me, and anytime I love it. Thank you so much.
No problem. And you let me know next time you've got a new book out, and I'll be sure to get it done, and we'll do this again. Everybody,
You
go out
got
and
it.
buy guys' books. They're if you like this show, you'll like the books, and go give them some love. Thank you, everybody.
GuyMorseBooks.com.
Yep, I'll have
And
everything in
if
the
you buy it
description.
from the website instead of Amazon, I'll get to keep some of the money, which is kind of nice for a change. But I send out author signed copies within 24 hours.
Oh, perfect. Well, we'll have to get you some books sold, I hope. All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. It's been a pleasure talking with you, guy. I could talk with you all night. So let's
Thank
get
you.
out of here.